Okay.
Okay.
We're all yours. I hope we behave.
So the way this came about, I had been talking with Debbie in our various capacities as executive assistant and head of personnel committee about how I had talked with Compass class a couple of months ago, just kind of sharing my story, kind of one of those, hey, you're somebody we see on staff, but we don't necessarily really know you. And so I was happy, as I'm always happy, to share my story, and that's what I intend to do today, and hopefully leave some time at the end to ask questions if you have them. I'm really open. I'm happy to ask any questions about what you hear, about what you don't hear, whether you ask me in person or whether you email me later, that's all perfectly fine. But I just want to tell you about me. And I have the unique situation of knowing pretty much everybody in here, which is not always the case when I get to do this. So that's a fun bonus. So starting off, I got my checklist. I grew up in Mesquite, lived there 25, 30 years. I have my two parents who still live there, along with my younger brother, who's 3 years younger than me. He still lives with my parents at the moment. I grew up going to the First Baptist Church of Forney, Texas. Very conservative, very Southern Baptist. Our pastor was head of the Southern Baptist of Texas Convention for a time. So that was my faith background. I came to Jesus in second grade or so, Vacation Bible School. At the time, I kind of feel it was a little bit of a peer pressure situation. Not that anybody was pressuring me, but I saw other people doing this thing and I was like, oh, I should do that too. And it became a genuine thing, but I think the catalyst was very much motivated by, oh, all these other kids are doing this, I should do this too. But I joined the choir from an early age. That was my first foray into music. As you all know, I'm very involved in the music here at Wilshire, and my career, I'll talk about, was music-based. But first grade, I was in choir, and I was in choir from first grade, Forney Baptist Church, all the way through college. Every year, I was in choir. So that was my first musical experience going through elementary school. I was in the All-City, one of the All-City children's choirs in Mesquite. That's where I met one of my longtime best friends, who's still my best friend, back in 2002 or 3, which is a fun experience. And when I got into 6th grade, there was not a band option. We were not yet at 6th grade being part of middle school, still part of elementary school at the time. But we did have an orchestra program when I was in 6th grade. The middle school orchestra directors would travel across to the elementary schools, and you'd have orchestra 1 day a week during like your PE period. And so I learned violin for a year in 6th grade, and that was short-lived because the year before I decided at a high school football game that I visited and saw the marching band that that's what I want to do. And so in 7th grade, made the jump to middle school, made the switch to French horn. And then the next year, when I was in 8th grade, I decided I want to be a band director. That was the year that, if anybody is familiar with Poteet High School in Mesquite, it was the second time they won state, but it was the first time of a 2-year repeat that they won the state marching band competition in 2005 when I was in 8th grade. I saw the band director and I said, I want to be like him. And so that was my trajectory starting in 8th grade really early. I wanted to be a band director. And so going into high school, going into college, that was my plan for my life. Still doing choir. I did lots of theater also between middle school and high school. I was in 16 different theatrical productions. I was a very busy student. And I did the honors classes. I did all the other stuff. So going to college, I went to Texas Tech University. Majored in music. I was in the Going Band from Raiderland and had a great time there. I did the pep band for basketball, made the trips to like Kansas City for basketball tournaments and everything like that. And I mean, it was all really, really great. I graduated in 2014, and then a couple years later got my first job, first teaching orchestra for a year. And I said, you know, I'm not really an orchestra person. Like my orchestra experience is I learned it in 6th grade, and then I had a semester-long string methods class in college, and that's like all my orchestra experience. But my middle school band director had reached out to me and said, hey, you're looking for a job, right? would you be willing to do this? And I said, sure, if you know that I'm like not an orchestra person. And it worked out. And I was planning to stay in that position for several years, or a few years at least, so I wasn't just hopping in and then skedaddling as soon as I found something more akin to what I was actually looking for. But I had a great first year. And then the next year, they opened an assistant band director position across the hallway in my school. And my principal said, hey, you're a band person, right? Do you want that job? And I said, yes, please, that'd be great. And so then I stayed at that school and I did 5 more years as a band director. So I was at that school for 6 years total, teaching middle school, orchestra, and band, 6th to 8th grade, which is an adventure. So in the background of all of this was this other thing that was happening in my life, which was dealing with me being me. And what I didn't know at the time was me realizing or trying to realize that I was transgender. I can point to episodes of TV shows that released when I was 5 or 6 years old where boys were dressed as girls or boys were turned into girls magically, and it made me feel funny. And in retrospect, I would call that funny feeling jealousy. And I wouldn't have said from that young age that I think I'm a girl or I want to be a girl. It was just, oh, wouldn't that be fun? And so when I was old enough to be left alone at home for any period of time, when my parents were out running errands or were otherwise occupied, that's when I first started getting into my mom's makeup drawer or into her closet. And I have those few stolen moments of putting on makeup poorly, and trying on different clothes and really enjoying the different fabrics, the smell of the cosmetics on my face. Like, I mean, obviously that's not what womanhood is, but those were my gateways into it. And then I would quickly wipe it away and put it back where I found it and then pretend it didn't happen. While I went to a Southern Baptist church and was a member there from 1995 to 2020, I didn't have a traumatic experience there. There wasn't a lot of fire and brimstone, gay people are going to hell. They certainly weren't talking about trans people because that wasn't a thing basically until a decade ago, as far as like public zeitgeist. But it was a sort of understood internal thing where I knew that, well, I mean, like gay was what you called people on the school playground, right? Like it was an insult. It wasn't something that was an okay thing to be. And certainly that connected to the feelings I was feeling about wanting to dress in clothes that weren't for little boys or whatever. And so every time I would indulge in these desires to feel more feminine for a time, I would feel an intense shame and put it away. And then I would go pray and say, God, please take away these urges. Please make me different. Please make me normal. And eventually that did turn into, God, you can turn me into a girl while I sleep. And then that didn't happen because that's not how it works. But there wasn't a lot of talking about those kind of feelings or experiences in my family. Very emotionally closed off in a lot of ways. And so it wasn't something I felt like I could go to my parents and talk about. Despite the message of you can talk to us about anything, because there's that shame attached to it that I knew that they would feel as well. There were only a couple of times where I ever got caught with anything. There was once I painted my toenails with clear nail polish, clear, and my mom smelled it or saw it, I don't know, and she wiped it off and said, little boys don't do that. And I say little boys, I was probably late elementary, sometime middle school age at this time. And then there was once in high school, she found a makeup sponge. And that one I could say, that's for theater, Mom. I just forgot it in my pockets. For theater, we were doing makeup for that. But other than that, I was really good at hiding it, including from myself. And again, for a long time, I would not have called myself trans because I didn't know what that was. I wouldn't have said, I would say I wanted to be a girl, or I would have been happier as a girl, but I didn't have like the knowledge that that was a possibility for anybody. Because again, being transgender and talking about those experiences wasn't like a widespread thing to me at the time. I held on to my family's politics, which, as you can expect, are conservative Republican. I remember vividly the 2008 election and a lot of the rhetoric that was being talked about with President Obama, and buying into some of it because I was in that environment. Mesquite's not necessarily the most liberal of places either. It's not Forney, but it's I was still in a very similar bubble, whether I was at church in Forney or whether I was in Mesquite at school. And as I got into college, the first big thing that happened was I was away from those bubbles. I mean, again, Lubbock is not the pinnacle of liberal thought, but I was on a college campus, and I was away from the people that I'd grown up around, and I was being introduced to a lot of different people. Goin' Band on its own has 400 people in it, and lots of different kinds of people. And so it started opening my mind in a lot of different ways. And I remember when it came to the 2012 election, first election I could vote in. Yeah, I knew Richard was going to say something. Stop right there.
She does this to me every Monday. She reminds me how much older I am.
I'm not reminding you of that. I'm reminding you how much younger I am. Anyway, so 2012 election, that was the first time I remember having doubts about my family's political background. I remember I had my absentee ballot when I was sitting there in my college dorm in Lubbock, and I thought, is voting Republican the right thing to do? And I did still vote for Romney, but I doubted it at the time, which was a new thing. That's, big step is doubting for the first time. And then in my last couple of years of college, I got to the point where I decided, you know what? If our mission as Christians is to make more Christians, to find people and bring them to Christ, how are we going to do that by telling people they are going to hell for who they love or who they are? How are we going to bring people to Christ by electing politicians who are trying to keep them from having the same rights as everybody else or take away the rights that they have? And so that was the turning point for me, was I cannot buy into this system any longer of electing people and believing that other people are lesser just because of this small part of them. And it is a small part, ultimately. And then 2015 comes and Donald Trump walks on the scene, and any remaining loyalty I had to the Republican Party went out the window. Now, at the time, I was living with my parents. I was still going to the Southern Baptist Church in Forney, Texas, because that's where my parents and my brother went. That's where my grandparents went. And so it was just the church that I knew, and the church that I'd always known. Now, when things started escalating following 2015 and the election of Trump, and as we get into Black Lives Matter and all that kind of stuff, it became really clear that this was not a place for me anymore. But there wasn't an easy way for me to leave it. And it was 2020 when all of a sudden we had a reason to not go to church. That was finally the breaking point that I was able to get away from that church that I'd been at for 25 years. I attended for a time virtually, but then it was leading up to the 2020 election. And I was like, no, I can't do this, because they made it very clear what they thought of the opposition candidate and anybody who voted for him. And so I had become affirming of other people and left my conservative politics behind long before I became affirming of myself. When I got my first job in the fall of 2017 as a teacher, I then got my own place for the first time. And this was when I got my first women's clothes and makeup and everything for the first time. All the way up to that, it'd be like bound items or relatives, whatever. But I came to the decision in late 2017, early 2018 that, I am a cross-dresser. And if that is the worst thing that I am, that is okay. Whether it's a sin or not, I don't know. If it is, at least I'm not, there's any number of sins that are worse, right? So I just said, this is who I am, and it's the way I'm going to be. Now, shortly after moving in, I did get a roommate who was another one of my longtime best friends, and I then had to be a lot more secretive with my things, and so I rented a storage unit that I had to drive 20 minutes to, and I would put everything in boxes and put it in the storage unit until I knew I would have a few hours on a weekend when he was working or otherwise occupied. And I'd go to the storage unit and I'd bring the boxes home, and then I'd indulge, and then I'd box them back up and I'd take them back. It was awful. And the first time I considered, could this be I'm transgender? First time that happened was 2018 or 2019. And I wrote at the time, I'm mostly happy in my body. I have had a good life. I don't feel like I need to transition. But if I knew that everybody in my life who loved me would be okay with it, and if there wasn't a stigma against it, I would start hormones this afternoon. I have that in writing. And then I pushed it aside because I said I can't do that to my family. And so I just proceeded the way I had proceeded for the next few years until January 2022. And I can't tell you what caused it, but all of a sudden it was overwhelming, and I could not ignore any longer the possibility, and at that time, high likelihood that I was transgender. And so I went to therapy for the very first time the day after I turned 30 in January of 2022. And less than a month later, I had started hormones. It was a very, very quick escalation from, I think I might be trans, to I think I am trans, but I can't transition because of what it would do to my family. And then I have to try this. And so the way prescriptions work, it's basically a 3-month trial. Or a 3-month basis is how often you would get the blood work done and get the medications that you need and everything. And so I said, I will try it for 3 months. And if it's not the right fit, then it should be apparent to me. Having the wrong hormones in your system is not good. And so I took the pills, and the only way I can describe it is from the moment I took those first pills, I felt an instant mental clarity. It was like there is no other path that I can take than down this path. And that made it then really hard to figure out what the path going forward was. I knew this one part, but I didn't know how my family would react. I didn't know how my friends would react. I didn't know what it would mean for my job. I was still teaching. And I mean, obviously the politics were a lot more complicated at that time too. I mean, President Biden was president at the time, but I still live in Texas. And so it was a really hard first year, especially. But as my body changed, as I took those medications, it just became more and more and more clear that this was what I needed to do for me. Now, also in early 2022, I decided, well, I hadn't been to church in a couple of years. I'd stopped going to my First Baptist Church of Forney, and I hadn't found something to replace it. I hadn't really felt a need or desire to place it. And so what I needed to do after I started hormones in February of 2022 was I needed to try and find a way to reconcile my faith, which I still held very strongly to, and my convictions, but this other part of myself that I was newly exploring. And could those be compatible? Because I'd never heard the argument that they could be. I'd only heard the opposite. And so I go looking online for Christian perspectives on queer people and transgender identities. And lo and behold, there's this guy, you may have heard of him, his name's Mark Wingfield, who has an article on on Baptist News Global. He had an article that was called 7 Things I'm Learning About Transgender Persons that he was writing during Wilshire's process of the study that would lead to the vote. And so I read this article. He has another follow-up that I read too. And then I saw, oh, he has a TED Talk called The Baptist Pastor and His Transgender Friends. And so I watched the TED Talk. And then, oh, he has a book too. I'll read the book. And it was about Wilshire, I didn't know that yet, Wilshire's process of becoming fully affirming. And I wept through the whole thing because I'd never seen this perspective before. And all of a sudden here was the path before me that I could hold on to my Christian identity and my Christian convictions and my love for Christ and wanting to be his hands and feet in the world, and also embrace this part of myself that I was newly discovering and trying to live into. And then, hold on a second, this church is only 25 minutes away from where I live. And so I started attending Wilshire virtually first. It was around Easter season. And then I tried attending the first time, May 1st of 2022, which was George's last Sunday. And so the parking lots were completely full. And I was not going to try and fight my way inside, so I went across the street to Einstein's and got a bagel sandwich and coffee and watched it in my car. And I came back the next week. And Wilshire Winds was playing, and that felt like a sign, because here I am, band director, trying to figure myself out, and this church has a wind band. How many churches have wind? I mean, maybe there's a larger proportion than I know, but my church certainly didn't have a wind band in Forney. And I mean, that's like how it got started. I attended that first Sunday and sat on the piano side, and everybody was really friendly. It should go without saying, I was still presenting as the old self. I was only a couple of months on hormones at the time, was not ready to be anything other than that at the time. But that first week I did fill out the visitor card, and I said, hey, this is who I am, and this is about me. I'm just looking for a place to belong. And Carolyn Murray reached out to me and recommended Ithaca. And so I went to Ithaca for the first time the next week. And like, those are like some of my best friends now. And then fast forwarding, just because I want to leave time for questions. I came out at Wilshire. I came out to Ithaca first. I attended Wilshire for a very long time with that guest card being my only coming out and telling people. I was just who I had been. But in January of 2023 is when I told Ithaca for the first time, and they embraced me with open arms. And I was saying, I'm not ready to change my pronouns yet. I'm not ready to change my name yet or to present any differently, but I just want you, like, it's coming. And I want you to be on this journey with me. They were great. They were very supportive from the very beginning. And then I came out publicly at Wilshire in May of 2023. So just over 3 years ago now.
Wow.
I came out via the tapestry in the I Am Wilshire, so as I'm sure many of you remember. And the thing I remember most about that Sunday was driving here. I had zero anxiety. It was not a scary thing, even a little bit. I was completely at peace. And there's something really special about your church being the first place where you can truly be yourself. Because growing up, I never would have thought that. Like, there were times when in my just a cross-dresser phase where I tried to go out in public, or did go out in public, but I had lots of anxiety to go to like a Goodwill or a Target and like skim around the women's section real quick and get out because I was worried about how people would react or how I presented in the space. But zero anxiety around coming to Wilshire that first Sunday. And I've been me here ever since. I came out publicly on Halloween of 2023 and got my name changed and most of the documents and all that kind of stuff all done. And then as far as this job, I continued teaching until basically I came out at Wilshire. In fact, the day I came out at Wilshire was a Sunday, obviously. It was the day of the church picnic. And then the next day was the start of my last week as a teacher. And so I had to go back to school as the other guy. And that was really hard. It was really hard to say goodbye to this career that I'd spent half my life pursuing and decided really young that it was what I wanted to do. But I didn't want to deal with the drama of trying to be a trans teacher in Texas. And in case you weren't aware, the Texas GOP platform now officially says that trans teachers shouldn't exist. Trans people shouldn't be teachers. That's on their party platform now. So I left teaching in May of 2023. I thankfully still had a paycheck until August of 2023 and was searching for new work. I had to, I was obviously applying as Chelsea and had very little luck. I applied probably 100, 150, 200 jobs, had maybe one interview. really hard time. I was driving Uber in the meantime, and that, I mean, it's fun in some respects, but it certainly doesn't really pay the bills if it's your only income. And then December came around and there was a job posting in the Tapestry for Wilshire. And I said, you know, I don't know if I can do this long term. It was part-time, there's no benefits, but you know, it's money coming in and I can at least get my feet on the ground until I find something else. And so I applied and I got the job, and I started in January of 2024 as a spiritual formation coordinator. And then a month and a half later, Debbie Burton posted that she was retiring and her position opened up, and I went and talked to Jerry McKenzie and I said, hey, can I do that? Because it was full-time and it had benefits and it was something that I could do long-term and not have to look for something else. And I got it. And so I've been doing that since March of 2024. And it's been really, really great. I love being at this church, both as a congregant and as a staff member. It's a really special place full of really, really special people, including all of you. But that's my story. And like I said, I want to leave room for questions. So does anybody have any questions while I take a sip of coffee?
So how did it go with your family?
Yeah, I did breeze past that, didn't I?
So I don't want to talk about.
No, I'm happy to talk
My
about it.
daughter's a lesbian, so I just, you know, and I know how hard it was for her to come up to us.
Yeah. So I'll give a little bit more than just the family. So the first people I came out to were the best friend that I mentioned, who I met in children's choir in 5th grade, and he was immediately supportive, and so was his wife, and I'm godparent to their oldest son, and they have 4 sons now. So many kids. And they're great. They're still super duper supportive. They live nearby. I get to see them as often as I want to. June of 2022 was when I came out to my parents and my brother. Came out to my brother first, very supportive. Has been, we're closer now than we ever have been. We were hanging out just last week. We went to the Jeopardy thing at the Alamo. And then my parents, I came out to in person. They're the only coming out that I did that I wrote out and then read to try and say the right things. And I went to their house. They lived 5 minutes away from where I lived at the time. I went to their house and I sat in my car for like 45 minutes, just trying to perk up the courage to go inside. I finally do. I go inside and I read it, and it was really hard. And when I drove home afterwards, I thought that was really hard, but we're gonna be okay. And then it kind of wasn't. They were really concerned about the safety of it. Being a trans person in Texas, like, yeah, I get it. Then they were worried about how my grandparents would react to it. I think the phrase, "this will break their heart," might have been said. And I didn't tell any other family for a long time. But we didn't talk about it after I told them initially, necessarily. We maybe talked about it in the next couple of days, but there wasn't a lot of talking about it afterwards. And so I didn't come out to, largely when I talk about my family, I'm talking about my mom's side of the family, because they're the ones who live in Texas, and the ones who I've always had the most connection with. I was sitting in a sanctuary choir rehearsal in February of 2023, right before I was, like the week of my 1-year HRT anniversary. And I got included on an email conversation with my family about a cruise they were planning for December of that year, but they were wanting to book now. And here I am, I haven't told them my plans or even who I really am. And so I have this sinking feeling in my gut, I have to tell them. And so I kind of hemmed and hawed over it a couple of days. I typed out a long thing that I was going to send them, and I couldn't get the tone right. I tried recording a video that I was going to send them, couldn't get the tone right. And so eventually I just called my aunt, who was the person who for a long time I considered being the first person I came out to, just because I see her as very compassionate. She's also a chemical engineer. She used to work for Shell. So I saw her as very smart, and I could appeal the science side of things to her. But it became clear really quickly that the rest of the family was not going to be on board with this. All very Southern Baptist. They would not be what I would refer to as MAGA, but they are very of the mind of like the Republican Party is the way of Christ and the Democrat Party, you know, etc. And this was going to send me to hell. And so I did go on that cruise with them, and I did go as Chelsea, but that's not what they called me and not what they have ever called me. I still see my family regularly. I actually was at my grandparents' house with my parents and younger brother just this past weekend for Father's Day. I have a relationship with them, we're cordial. I no longer try and pretend to be somebody else. Ever since I came out publicly in Halloween of 2023, I have been me around them and they can deal with it. But like I said, they don't call me Chelsea. And they don't think of me as their daughter, granddaughter, niece, etc. The one surprise being, and it's kind of a complicated situation, my dad's mom. Before I came out publicly, I had my list of people that I wanted to know before I came out to everybody, and she was one of them. And I typed out a message in Facebook Messenger and I sent it to her, and then I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and walked into this building for church. And then I did not look at my phone until after lunch that day, and the first thing I saw was, this doesn't make a damn bit of difference in my love for you. And she was the only one who would call me by the name Chelsea. And even on like some stupid Facebook Granddaughters Day thing or whatever, she included me among her list of granddaughters. Even forgot her first granddaughter and included me in it. That was funny. But she was very supportive, but still very conservative Republican. And when I came out publicly and started talking more openly about my politics leading up to the 2024 election, she made it very clear that she did not like my politics. And so that relationship has been really strained, unfortunately. And it just is what it is. So that's your question, Terry. Any other questions? I can stay a few minutes. I don't have to robe before choir. Anybody?
So in August, we have James coming.
Yes.
What, if anything, do you offer, suggest that we be intentional about before they arrive?
What I would say, so I'm assuming everybody knows James is non-binary, uses they, them pronouns, which is
They probably
admittedly,
everybody know.
well, now you know.
New resident.
Yeah, James is a new resident. We have James and Bryce coming. They start August 1st. James actually moves in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Very excited. I was actually emailing them just the other day. They're very excited to join our trivia team. Which is very important.
Behind the scenes.
Can we
plotting.
Yeah.
watch you in trivia?
Oh, you could, sure.
Where is it at?
Vector Brewing every Tuesday night at 7. But so I will admit that they, them pronouns are sometimes the struggle for me too. And I don't pretend to understand the non-binary experience the same way I understand the trans experience. I mean, non-binary falls under the transgender umbrella. But my experience of gender is very binary. Theirs obviously isn't. And so the best advice I have, obviously James is their name. They, them is their pronouns. If you mess up, it's okay. Don't make a big deal about it. They're used to people messing up. Just correct yourself, move on. Try and do better next time. That's my biggest advice. They're gonna be great. But yeah, it's something that I'm going to be learning to do better with as well. And part of that is exposure. And that's part of all of this is like, if half the Republicans, more than half the Republicans just met a trans person and like hung out with them for a little bit, they'd see we're just people who want to pay the bills and live a happy life. And yeah, so that's my advice as far as that goes. Anybody else?
I don't have a question. I have an observation. Well, two. One, beautiful story.
Thank you.
Powerful. Gotta keep you telling it.
Thank you.
I'm serious. It's,
Just to briefly interrupt you, I talked at the Centerpiece Stories and Tunes a couple weeks ago, and then separately at the end of the event, Sally and Karen came up to me and asked me to do different things at the Centerpiece conference in October.
Good.
And so I'll be talking there and then doing some sort of breakout session there as well.
great. Okay, so
Thank
you
you.
need to hear that. But my other observation, which is powerful in its own right, because this class knows, I say it all the time, God's always talking to all of us all the time. And I'm just, as you told the story, I'm just thinking about how God is talking to you in, Forney, right? And He's affirming you in Forney, right? But the people around you aren't. But that doesn't mean God's not talking, right? And just, as you open that up, it's just, for me, it's just the great power of our God to find us, to find you, right? God was always where you wanted to be, right? God was there. That's just so beautiful. And the heartbreaking part of that to me is, there's this crowd in Forney that's just damn sure they're right, because that's all they know.
Right.
And they're missing out on a beautiful person.
Yeah, right. And in their midst is someone who believes a lot of the same things they do, right? And that's fascinating to me. And the last thing I'll just say to you is that it's so hard for all of us, because we're all sitting here, probably many of us in the same place. It's so hard to let go of your tradition. Right? I mean, Southern Baptist is your tradition.
Absolutely.
So hard to let go of it, even when it's hurting you. It's so hard to let go of it. That's true for all of us. But you gotta let it go to let God do what God does.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Anyway, beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm happy to. And like I said, you're welcome to email me, text me, whatever. I'm happy to answer any questions that you don't have right now but might think of later. If you have and don't want to say out, that's fine. I'm really an open book. If you want to friend me on Facebook, I write a lot there too. I like to share, and I was happy to do that with you today. So thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.